Hello, everyone. It's Mrs. Wallace. I just wanted to give you some introduction to our next unit. We're going to be looking at some land-based empires, Islamic empires like the Ottoman Empire, the Mughal Empire, and the Safavid Empire. So we'll take a look at these one at a time, but just kind of look at this as a little bit of an introduction to get you excited about studying these topics. So, a couple of things just to differentiate land-based versus sea-based empires. Soon we'll look back at Europe and even a little bit at China, which becomes kind of isolationist, under the Ming dynasty eventually, but for a while has some focus on some naval enterprises. But maybe if we look at sea-based empires like Spain and Portugal, and we're going to see European countries that start to colonize areas of the Americas. We see, naval power, even borrowed naval power. A lot of the naval power that countries like Portugal are going to use to, for example, go around the most southern part of Africa or travel to India or ultimately travel to modern day Brazil. All of that technology is mostly going to be borrowed from the Indian Ocean trade routes and from some other spaces as well, from more east in Asia. But we definitely have some sea-based empires that are kind of coming our way soon. But we also have some empires that are very extensive, really control a great deal of commercial trade routes, and are land-based. And these three empires that we're about to get involved in are all land-based. And sometimes these are even referred to as the gunpowder empires because we do see technology in terms of like cannon fire develop, and some of that weaponry maybe creates a little bit of the dynamic for power, and how much that's the case. We could debate. Land-based empires continue to generally rely on armies and roads and inland urban areas, and both sea-based and land-based powers are going to make use of increasing technologies and guns and cannons and muskets. So we're looking at the time period that maybe is beginning in the 1450s, and we'll place the beginnings of the Ottoman Empire even long before that in the 1200s. But over the course of time, we see the development of some of this weaponry that becomes significant to maintaining some of the power, as much as other things do. Also, if we look at collectively these three empires, just a couple of things to note about them. They are all going to be Islamic empires. So, in a way, some historians would really argue that the rise of the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals really becomes almost like an Islamic renaissance. This is not the first of the Islamic societies. We had already learned about the Umayyads and the Abbasids and kind of the Islamic Golden Age, but to some degree, these next Islamic empires really harken back to the very big focus on the religion of Islam, and also on some of the dynamics that really created the Islamic Golden Age. There's some hearkening back to that history in a sense, and there is in a big way some degree of like a renaissance going on. There's also going to be a lot of link to other societies. The Ottomans, for example, are going to link very much to the Byzantine Empire, and so there'll be some cultural connections there. The Safavids in Persia, and the Mughals, in India. So you have, lots of cultural influences that are distinct, in each of these that will be a little bit different. But these various empires probably represent the height of Muslim political and military power. They don't all peak at the exact same time. They have different like lifespans. The Ottoman Empire, for example, will exist for hundreds and hundreds of years. We really don't see the end of the Ottoman Empire until the 1920s, and it develops as early as the 1200s, so it's on the map for quite some time, most of that time as an empire. We are going to see some countering influence between groups like the Ottomans and the Mughals and Europeans. So as Europe after the Renaissance starts to rise under new monarchs, we see some of those new monarchs coming into conflict or alliance in some cases with the Ottomans, for example, or with the Mughals. So that becomes significant. There's a great deal of art and architecture that we're going to be spending some time with, a great deal of cultural significance in terms of art and architecture. By the 1700s, we see a great deal of decline, and there's strong debate about when the Ottoman Empire in particular declines, but in the time period of the 1600s, we see, each one of these societies kind of dominate and, be really, really significant. We will see the sea-based powers, increase until the 1800s, and become colonizing powers. And you don't really see the Ottomans and the Mughals and the Safavids really competing for overseas territories in the Americas or in Asia in the same way that European societies do. So something that makes these sea-based empires unique is also, where they come to become, colonial powers. And we'll talk about that more in some time. So the map that we're looking at is largely Anatolia, which you can think of as like modern day Turkey. It's not quite an exact match, but maybe 95% of modern day Turkey could be considered some of the land of Anatolia. You can see quite a few of the water bodies here, the Mediterranean Sea and the Aegean Sea, the Black Sea, the Sea of Marmara. And you can see the Byzantine Empire, which at the time of the beginnings of the Ottomans, we still have a Byzantine Empire that is present and very much surrounded by the city of Constantinople. What we're looking at is known as the Beylik period of the Turkish groups. There had been, much earlier than the Ottomans, some migration of Turkish groups, and think of like, the Mongols too as like a Central Asian group. Turkic peoples tended to migrate from Central Asia, and a variety of Turkic peoples become very significant in the area of Anatolia and other areas of the Abbasid Empire. We saw, for example, that the Seljuk Turks become very, very intertwined in rule in Baghdad and perhaps lead to some of the decline of the Abbasids. They also have a very significant battle with the Byzantines. So the Seljuk Turks take on the Battle of Manzikert in the 1000s and win a battle that acquires a great deal of Byzantine land. So over the course leading into the 1200s, there's a great deal of excessive, kind of territorial expansion by a group known as the Seljuk Turks, culturally and language speaking Turkic people, but also a group that embraces Islam. Remember that the Byzantine Empire is largely Orthodox Christian and, was at one time fairly significant in terms of size and would include a lot of the areas that become, part of the Ottoman Empire. But the area of the Seljuk Turks ultimately breaks down into a variety of different Turkic groups. And the Beylik period that we're looking at, we're kind of looking at smaller Turkic groups that are to some degree in competition with each other and maybe competing for some degree of unifying power. Osman the First, who is really going to be credited with beginning what becomes the Ottoman Empire, is really an individual in one of the Beyliks, which kind of becomes growing group. So Osman the First will drive the Ottoman Beylik, to become much more significant. The Ottomans will successfully conquer a great deal of territory throughout Eastern Europe. We know that the Ottoman Empire is going to conquer Constantinople, and we'll see the fall of Constantinople, and the Byzantine Empire will come to its collapse under the Ottomans. The Ottomans, over the course of its empire, will take on some larger lands in the Balkans, will take over lands in Arab countries, will take over Hungary, and ultimately get stopped at the gates of Vienna. So the Ottoman Empire will, over time, become massive, but its start is really very small, with a nomadic leader who has a great deal of leadership skills and is able to unify other beyliks under him. And we'll watch a quick video about this in class tomorrow, just to give you a little bit of a reminder, but some of this is just introductory. Some other things about the Ottoman Empire that become very important, especially as it grows: it will be very, very diverse. So something that it shares with Charles V's Habsburg Empire, even though it will be an enemy of the Habsburg Empire, there's a great deal of diversity. And the Ottomans, like the Habsburgs, have to try to create some sort of rule for the very diverse, especially diversity within religion. And, we see the Ottomans kind of develop a very specific plan, in a sense, to accommodate a great deal of the diversity. This is going to be a very sophisticated empire with a great deal of economic and political focuses, and really significant growth economically and politically. And we're also going to see some significant urban centers. This is probably one of the most powerful empires of its time, maybe along with some empires that we have yet to look at in China and in South America. So consider the Ottomans a massive player, especially in connection to Europe and the Renaissance, new monarchs who are just barely getting their game on. They're just beginning to grow as kind of spaces that have some economic growth. The Ottoman Empire by the 1600s is going to be incredibly dominant. You can see the map that's in green. The territory by 1683 that's directly administered. You can see into modern day Egypt. You can see, the city of Cairo, for example. You can see some of the areas like Damascus in Syria, or Jerusalem, or some of the areas like Baghdad. You can see quite a few areas in modern day Balkans. So we're thinking about places like Serbia, looking at places like Greece. So, not only modern day Turkey, but quite a few areas. You can also see autonomous territory, basically territory that the Ottomans control, but maybe leave a great deal as like a vassal state that has some of their independence. And, you can also see some territory that they had, but is lost by 1683. I would look at 1683 as really the peak time of the Ottomans. And this is another map that maybe gives you a sense in the long term. The light brown is the extent in 1683. That includes the area in the dark brown. If you look in 1914, you see a lot of area that had been lost, and area that is primarily Anatolia, parts of Syria, parts of Jerusalem, and into the religious cities of Medina and Mecca. By 1914, the Ottoman Empire is on a great deal of decline, and it'll be the treaties after World War II that will primarily end, the Ottoman Empire, and create states that become states in the Middle East that are going to be essentially, for all intents and purposes, colonial states that will be conducted by Britain and by France, okay, and that becomes significant in terms of modern history and some of the colonialism in the region. But just kind of note the size of the Ottoman Empire and its significance, and its, role in the Balkans, as well as in some of the former parts of the Arab Islamic Empire. So when we say cultural diversity, we're looking at a variety of cultural